Yeah, that's just not going to work. And there's no space there. That sticks out an inch and a half at least.
Hi, I'm Joe, and welcome to MotorCity Boat Works. Let's get to work. This episode is one in a series of videos about choosing the components for the new diesel engine that's going inside my pocket trawler. There's a lot of details that go into choosing the engine and all of its components. I've talked about this in some other episodes. You're going to want to check that out. My new engine is going to be a Beta Marine 43 horsepower diesel engine. This episode is going to be all about choosing the oil sump pan that goes with the engine. Ta-da! This, I believe, is going to be the oil pan for the Beta Marine 43 diesel engine. This should be a deep sump pan. The engine comes with a couple of options. One of them is a shallow sump and one of them is a deep sump. This is a deep sump, and if we're lucky, I'll be able to take this and mock it up kind of dimensionally, make sure that it fits in the space by where the engine bed are on the boat. And that's what we got to check out. So let's see what's going on here. They shipped this out to me because I was a little bit concerned that something might not fit. And so Keith at Beta Marine sent me this. I've been waiting to open it. So that's not, there's two of them. Oh, they sent me both of them. Brilliant. Brilliant. Ha ha! Okay. So this is it. Look, take a look. This must be the deep sump. Here. And this must be the shallow sump. Here, take a look. You can see the difference. Close this up here. Check this out. Deep, shallow. Huh. Considerably different. I believe this one here, the red one is about 7.5 inches. This one is about 5.25 inch depth. All right, so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna take this and we're gonna kind of get it mocked up on maybe like a wooden or a plywood type of frame. Dimensionally, everything will be correct, just like it would be on an engine, and this will be able to tell us whether or not this will fit down in between the two engine beds. You know, the hull, it's kind of like a tunnel down there where the shape of the contour of the hull is. We got to make sure that this fits within that space. Well, preferably we want this one, but if this one doesn't fit, for sure we got to make sure that the smaller one fits. The reason for this is this is the bottom of the engine. And oil's in here and it gets brought up into the engine, right, as it's running. You want the bigger one if you're going to be cruising long term because it reduces the amount of oil changes and what have you and all this kind of stuff you got to do. The shallow sump is an option when you don't have a lot of room. All right, so we'll take this out to the shop and we'll see what I can do. MotorCity Boat Works has no sponsors. I get no compensation from any of the products or the people, places, or things on my YouTube channel. I have no sponsors. To do this, I'm going to basically use a mock-up that I made once before when I was trying to get the angle of the shaft, and I was trying to determine what transmission would fit inside this space. It's basically made of some Coroplast plastic, and a piece of plastic channel sits down on top of the propeller shaft. The end of the propeller shaft is what everything is based off of. From that point, I can take some very precise measurements and hopefully get an idea what fits. Well, the good news is it looks like the shallow sump definitely fits. There's no question about that.
The question now is, does the normal sump, the standard sump, will it fit inside there? I think this looks pretty good. Take a look.
I show you this to give you an idea of how I tried to come up with a solution. How do you measure something in a given space? A lot of our older viewers really gave me a hard time about talking about using scanning and LiDAR from the iPhone to kind of digitally represent measurements and sizing things for this type of installation. And the reality is that if those techniques could be mastered, it really would solve a lot of problems of trying to do this manually. Your manual mock-ups are only as good as your measurements and the materials that you're working with, as we're quickly going to see.
Yeah, so that's the deep sump pan, the standard pan. And I've removed the fitting on the side there that I think is for the oil pickup when you change the oil. And it still doesn't fit. I think it's too tight. It just goes too far down into the tunnel here by the bilge. And it's not enough room. There's not enough room as you go further down into the keel. I think it's got to be a shallow sump.
Hey, I just want to take a moment to thank all of our supporters and fans, all of our subscribers, and those of you who are supporting us on Patreon. If you're new to the channel and you're just now checking us out, the single most important thing that you can do is hit that subscribe button. Tell a friend about MotorCity Boat Werks. This channel would not be possible without your support. Thank you. Today I want to try and improve on this mock-up that I was doing to determine whether or not the oil pan for the engine will fit inside the engine bed area there. I wasn't really happy yesterday with how the pattern making and all that kind of process went. It was very sloppy, and I feel like I can't get a very precise measurement. The problem lies that the contraption that I built was really too flexible and it was bending due to the weight from the oil pan. So I couldn't get a really accurate understanding of how it fits inside this. So we're going to try something a little bit different. I managed to find a piece of metal tubing. This is actually extra leg for the little Werks, the temporary do-it-yourself shrink wrap structure that I built outside for the sailboat projects. Well, I found an extra one of these, and wouldn't you know it, this is just about 1¼ inches in diameter, which, you know, will match the shaft that's on the boat. And I think with a little bit of duct tape, we might be able to get this on there and use this. It's quite a bit more rigid than the plastic that I was using. And we'll come up with a kind of a better way of seeing whether or not the engine pan will fit inside there. Why? Why is this important? I need to make sure that there's no possibility that the standard oil pan sump will fit inside the boat, because making the decision of going with the shallow sump versus the standard sump, well, that's a big decision, and I want to absolutely rule out that there's no way the big sump will fit in there. I need to get a more precise measurement. That's what we're going to do today. For my purposes, there's a big difference between these two pans and what they can do. Because I'm going to be using my trawler to do parts of the Great Loop, I'll be doing a lot of long-term cruising. A regular oil pan on a Beta Marine engine, you change the oil about every 250 hours of operation. But on a shallow pan, well, that is reduced to about 150 hours of operation. What does that really mean if you're doing your Great Loop cruise? Well, by my estimation, it's the difference between having to change your oil, say, every 5 or 6 weeks, versus being able to change your oil maybe every 2 months or more. That's 40% less oil capacity, 40% more oil changes over a year-long cruise. If I can fit the regular oil pan, well, that's what I want to do, but I'm not sure that it's going to fit. As much as possible, I have to make sure that this oil pan position is exactly where it's going to be when the actual engine is here. And we do that by using a couple of measurements. The most important measurement is from the center of the shaft. Everything is kind of referenced off of that point. And
What I have to do is figure how far along this extension it's going to be before the pan would start inside, the space between the engine beds. I also have to make sure that if this is the shaft, the pan is the proper height, below the shaft. It sits below the shaft. We know that measurement is 23 millimeters. We know that from the CAD drawings and what Beta Marine has told me. So roughly 1 inch from the center of the shaft is where the top flange of the oil pan sump is going to be. So what I've done is taken some thin pieces of Luan or plywood, and I've put them together to come up with a sandwich that is the appropriate height. When you take that height plus the radius of this extension, you get about 1 inch. And so this will put us in the ballpark to know, is there enough room around the oil sump pan? Is it going to interfere with anything on the sides? We have to know this. I believe for the shallow sump pan, this is not going to be an issue. We want to be sure. What I really like to know is it possible to get the standard sump pan, in there? I don't think it's going to fit, but we want to know this because... All right, so after all that, this is what I've come up with here. What we've got is an extension that'll go on the shaft. We've got a little sight hole here so I can see where the edge of the shaft is, make sure it's in the right position. It will go on the shaft. This will come down here and should go right between the engine bed, and we'll be able to see from the profile, does it actually fit inside there? And that should tell us what we need to know. This distance right here is 0.7, and this distance right here is like 0.36, this thickness. Brings us to the top of the flange here. So we're right at an inch, a little over an inch. Give us some wiggle room. Everything's on the center line here. All right, let's go try this. All right. We'll put a little bit of lube on here. The tape is acting as a spacer, and this way this should slide on there, no problem. Let's see what we can do here. All right. I think this is gonna work. Check this out. Look. Let's see if we can see everything went together just like I planned. All right. So this looks good. There is plenty of room here. So both sides. I want to double check the measurements here. There we go.
Okay, now let's try the standard oil sump pan. I want to see if this will fit inside there.
And there's no space there. That sticks out 1.5 inches at least. Yeah, that's just not going to work. There's just not enough room to put the deep sump pan in there, the standard pan. And you can't grind anything off of the tunnel area there because that's actually the hull. That's the inside of the hull by the keel. And you don't want to grind away on any of that. Even if you could, how much could you take off? I mean, if the hull is a 1/2 inch thick, maybe a little more at the keel, you can't take off anything that would make a difference because the side pickup on the deep sump is at least 1.5 inches, sticks out 1.5 inches. And I just feel like it would be very difficult to line this thing up, have something kind of interfering, trying to get alignment. So with the shallow sump, clearly everything fits. You can make it work, no problem. There's a lot of room on either side. There's room for the pickups on the side. Everything is good. This is very interesting because, you look at the bilge area here, the keel area here by the engine beds, and you think that the boat is symmetrical, but in reality it's not. when we put the extension on here and bring that oil pan forward, you can see on one side that there's plenty of room, and on the other side, there's not enough room, which would indicate that the tunnel itself is not symmetrical, that the space is not symmetrical. There is less room on the starboard side than there is on the port side. If you're using the shaft as the center line, and we know this from lots of other examples during the fabrication and working on various projects, that the two halves of the boat, the two sides of the boat are not symmetrical. They're off a little bit. Maybe a quarter inch, maybe even more. It kind of depends.
This project, like many of my projects, well, there are some things that you've got to know. There's some lessons that I learned doing this. Maybe they'll help you out if you're doing something similar. The first thing is that it sure does help if you have someone on the other end of this type of project giving you some technical advice and kind of walking you through the process to help you do one of these things. I can't say enough about the service that I've received from Beta Marine. You know, I'm on the phone pretty much every other day talking to Keith at Beta Marine, and he's helping me get through this process. If you were trying to do this with an engine that, you know, you got somewhere and you're doing everything on your own, I can only imagine how difficult it would be to not have someone kind of giving you technical advice. Whenever possible, you want to get the actual component that you're trying to test fit into a space. I actually debated trying to just get the whole engine, and then I could mess around with the gantry trying to get it to fit in there. But I'm so glad that Beta Marine was willing to send me not one, but 2 different pans for me to try, so that I have a very high confidence that what I'm buying is actually going to fit inside the space in the engine room. The second thing you need to keep in mind is don't be afraid to do a mock-up, to do the mock-up. My first go around with the cobbled together kind of plastic extension that I was using to get my initial measurements, well, that was actually very helpful because it helped me understand how the mock-up actually needed to be built to really be able to see what I was doing and to ensure that I'm getting the best measurement possible. Sometimes you have to make a pattern to actually make a better pattern to get to the point that you're actually going to accomplish what you want to do. The third thing that I always want to remind you is that the quality of your patterns and these measurements that you're taking, they are 100% dependent on the materials that you're using, how good your pattern is, how tight the tolerances are, and the reality is, it's how well you measure the actual pieces of what you're trying to do. It doesn't do any good to make a sloppy pattern out of inferior material and then take crappy measurements and try and extrapolate from that something that's going to make a difference later on. You got to do it right from the very beginning. The final piece of advice that I would give somebody if they're doing this is to just take your time and work through the process one step at a time. I can't tell you how much I wish I could fast forward ahead, buy the engine, have it in the shop, be installing it and messing around with all of the various components and items. But the reality is there are steps that have to be made, little tiny steps bringing me up to the precipice when we can finally take the leap and actually get started in the installation on the engine and even the electronics that are going to be going into the boat. You've got to be patient. It takes a little bit of time. Work through everything methodically.
All right, so that was a very, very kind of long process to get to this point. It confirmed absolutely in my mind what I thought. The second mock-up was much better, much more precise. I have a high degree of confidence that the shallow pan will fit, and I feel confident that the big one won't. So we'll cross that off the list. And I'll move on from there. I have a lot of other projects going on the boat, trying to get everything ready for a final kind of a wiping, vacuuming, paint cleanup on the interior so that then I can start putting in wire. Every cutout has been made. Everything's kind of prepped. Still have a few things to go, but we're getting very close and we'll get to wiring here very soon. Once we get through the wiring, I think this boat's really going to come together quite fast because, in fact, most of the parts are already done, prepared, the windows, everything's all ready to go. They're just waiting to be installed, and I can't install them because I got to get certain things done first. So That's what I got for you. I hope you stick with me as we continue doing the build on this great loop boat project that I've got going here. I'm telling you, we'll get to the water eventually. It's just going to take a while. I'll see you again next time. Stay motivated. Thanks for watching.
Make sure you're all caught up on all my episodes for this trawler restoration project. Watch the playlist for the Albin 27 pocket trawler. It'll bring you up to date. It'll show you everything I've done so far.